Hey, everyone. Welcome to The More You Know, The Better It Tastes, the most amazing podcast, out there, right?
In all the world.
San Antonio restaurants and
That's
the flavors
right.
of Texas. And I'm Susie Lafredo, and I'm here with my business partner.
I'm Alan Williams. And today, Susie.
He's so excited.
Today.
Yeah.
6-time James Beard nominated chef, Mr. Stephen McHugh. Chef, welcome.
I appreciate y'all. Thank you so much for
having me. Am I right?
me.
Is it 6 or is it more?
6 is good. Yeah.
He'll take 6.
I love to tell people that, Bruce has 7 and I'm not trying to tie him. I'm good at 6. So.
Right.
He's another one we want to have on the podcast. I've never actually met, and we're talking about Bruce Auden. And so he's another one.
One of my favorite chefs, salt of the earth, just a great guy.
So Chef Stephen runs Cured at Pearl. He's at 306 Pearl Parkway. He's also running a private club out at the Spurs practice facility. We want to talk about that a lot too. That's really cool. Yeah. So man, you've been around everywhere you go. It just seems you touch gold and you just have just done some amazing things.
Oh, I appreciate that. It's been really fun. San Antonio has been very good to me. We've been my wife and I were laughing. We've been here 15 years now.
Wow.
You're
flying by, yeah.
Yeah. So, so you grew up on a farm in Wisconsin, right?
Yeah.
So do you think that was an inspiration for you in reference to your restaurants and the mission of your restaurants?
Most definitely. Early in my career, I probably never would have thought that. I think early on it was about going and learning and kind of being a chef and not really thinking much about farmers and fishermen and all the things I grew up doing. And just, that was my childhood, and,
right.
And so it's kind of come full circle, which is great, and understanding that life and the folks I grew up around and the struggles that they have, and it's really shaped how I cook and how I run my business.
Sure. So was there a specific type of cuisine at home? Was there a lot of cooking that went on at home and
a lot of cheese
that led you to saying, I want to be a chef?
So my parents both very good cooks, but they were working professionals, and they had bought this old dairy farm in the year I was born. And I won't say when that is because I have these young looks. But I have 6 brothers, and it was really just a magical childhood raising our own animals, putting in our own crops, and my dad put in an orchard. And so year-round, we were constantly doing things, canning and putting food up and raising hogs and chickens and geese and ducks. And earlier in my childhood, we had cattle, but we got to a point where that just became too much, trying to milk every day. And so I don't know, my parents were very good at being hospitable, and I think there was that was something I didn't figure out until later in my career, that you would see, my dad, when the neighbors would come over, family was over, come in, and he's clearing the table, and he's cracking a couple beers and getting some food out or firing up the grill, and so you can imagine with 7 kids, it was food was something that didn't stick around very long,
right.
and they were always constantly figuring out ways to feed us, and so they were the most frugal people as well, and that has definitely shaped how I am as a chef and as a business owner, because I don't throw away anything. I'm not cooking garbage, but there's so much that I've learned on how to preserve, ferment, pickle, put food up, utilization, those type of things. And so I learned so many techniques from them. I don't think I understood the food aspect of what they were doing until later in my career.
The impact that it had.
Yeah, and kind of how to feed people and feed people in mass. They were doing that every single day. So,
that's
wow.
true. We'd go through gallons of milk a day. It was just...
I bet. I imagine. So you needed to live on a farm.
Yeah, that's interesting. We work with Chef John Tardif a lot. I don't know if you know Chef or not. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
And he was telling us when he was learning, and he went to the Cordon Bleu in Paris, and he said that he remembers that they would bring a chef in. no, maybe it was one of the restaurants you worked at there. They would set this chef up, and this is to see if they wanted to hire him or not. And they would, put everything, the knives and everything in place, had a little garbage can right here, and have him go to town. And then at the end, whenever he was done, they would come, and they didn't look at the food. They looked at the garbage can. If there was stuff in there, we can't afford you. You're too much of you waste. There's no waste.
Yeah, they said
use
you
everything.
use all of that
I
for
thought that was
stock
brilliant.
for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, is your family still in Wisconsin?
Yeah, we're my parents have both passed. I have brothers in Wisconsin. I have two brothers that live in Colorado, and then I'm in Texas.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So-
And how do you like San Antonio?
Love it. Yeah, it's been great. As you probably realize or know that when I moved here, I was diagnosed with lymphoma.
Yeah.
And it was just a kind of a shock.
So it was right after you got here.
Right before I got here.
Before.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. And you still moved.
Just a couple months.
Okay.
Yeah. That's one of the the funny stories is that I had an oncologist in New Orleans and he was talking to me about the chemo treatments and everything we were gonna have to do, and I just said I'm supposed to be moving to San Antonio in like 2 months, and I don't know, I guess I'm gonna have to stay here, and he looked at me. And I remember this plain as day. He looked at me and he said, "I don't remember telling you to stop living your life."
That's cool.
And
Wonderful.
so he helped me find a great oncologist here in San Antonio, and I didn't miss a beat. And did a treatment in New Orleans, moved, a week later, got here, and was ready for my next treatments. I mean, it was just
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you end up in New Orleans?
Cooking. So
I read you went to the CIA, but which one? New York?
New York,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, and kind of rolling back a little more, what made you realize that you wanted to be a chef?
Yeah. So I'm once again, going to praise my parents in the fact that I was lucky enough that when I was 14, and this was true for all my brothers, that when we were old enough to get work permits, we were to get jobs.
Yeah.
And we were to not have jobs. And if we did not have a job, we were to go and get another job, right?
Right.
So I mean, I'm very lucky that work ethic was there. And I remember it clear as day on my 14th birthday, my dad driving me to the high school and saying, "You're going to go in there, you're going to go to the office, you're going to ask them for a work permit, and you're going to fill it out." And once I had that, it was go get a job. And I did a year of working on a neighbor's farm, which was awful, just working in a cornfield, and I did not want to do that. And so I had another brother that was working for a youth camp one town over. I grew up in a very small town, and he said they're looking for a dishwasher. And so I said, I can figure that out. They got a big machine, and you're on a crew of like 3-4 people, and you're mopping and, just working, right?
Yeah.
And I loved it. I just absolutely loved being around these other people, and you're meeting high school kids from the neighboring county, and you're meeting handicapped folks that are that you're working with. You're working with people who were down on their luck, and you're just meeting. You're kind of meeting so many different folks, and I just loved it. I enjoyed watching the chefs, at the youth camp chefs, right?
Yeah.
But I just enjoyed the giant freezers and the huge pans, and it just was a whole new world. And I wasn't always the best student in high school. I struggled. I was very good in music, and I loved that, but I think that was just a creative side, right? And so I got around these folks, and then that same brother that got me that job, he had moved on to a local bar where he was bartending, and he said, "We're looking for cooks in the kitchen at the bar." I said, "Let's do it." And so
Let's go.
I got a job there cooking, and from there it was sky's the limit. I just fell in love with it. And,
It's so cool. I've heard stories from other chefs where the initial thing that they loved, and it's something that you still see, that you, of course, are always going to see in a kitchen, are so many people from different walks of life.
Yeah.
And so you have so many different experiences because you meet so many different people. It's really cool.
Yeah, and I did a year of college thinking that that's what everyone's supposed to do, and I had a music scholarship.
Hey, you're a saxophonist, I read.
I was.
You still play?
No.
Oh.
It was that creative coming out, like you said.
Yeah. But I hated school, and I realized that at that point.
Yeah.
And I didn't learn like everybody else. And so I always, you kind of think you're not the brightest. And then once you get into an environment, and CIA really showed me that. And, it was my dad. Once I left college, my dad was like, I don't understand why you just don't go to culinary school. You love it so much. And it was like, culinary school? I don't even know what a chef looks like. I've never been around a real chef. And and he encouraged me. And so I went to CIA and just
that was
sky's
it.
the limit. Yeah, I loved it. I just loved it and just poured myself into it and still
so
am.
cool.
Still learning to this day.
Yeah. Since Cured is at Pearl next to the CIA here, do you use some of their students?
Oh yeah. I've got several students that work for me. I take
great.
externs from there, and that that's the cool thing about CIA is when they call it externship, right? It's not like an internship, but externship.
Right.
And I remember being at CIA, and most of my classmates, like, I'm going to go back to Jersey and work. I'm going back to New York. I'm going back to Connecticut. And where are you going to go? So I'm certainly not going back to Wisconsin. I can go anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And so I ended up in New Orleans.
Wow.
I had a friend of mine that I was in school with, and he said, listen, he goes, I went to college down in Louisiana. You would love it, and you are not going to learn from, there's no place better.
This is the best in the world to learn. Yeah. So many wonderful restaurants in New Orleans. Wow.
And I thought, well, I'm 20 years old, and why go anywhere else? So I moved down there. I worked at the Hilton on Poydras. At that time, I think it was they had like the distinction of being the largest hotel in the on that side of the Mississippi. And it's like
Right.
It's thousands of rooms, and I'm working in kitchens that were like just armies of people, and of all walks of life, and I'm just just soaking it in, and food I've never seen before and never heard of, and I'm eating crawfish and just pouring myself into it. And 5 months on an externship was just not enough. So when I graduated, I couldn't get back there fast enough. I just loved it.
Yeah. So do you think that initial job at the Hilton helped you also create your business sense? Because it's quite, there's a lot that goes on. With that many people and running a kitchen that size.
I don't know about that. I just know that I love the people. I love the food. I love the energy. The city, it kind of crawls into your bones, and it's hard to shake. It still is. My wife and I go back quite a bit. She's from there. And so, I just couldn't wait to get back into that city and soak it up. And I had made friends in those few first months, and friends that I'm still friends with today. And it just, I spent 15 years there, and it was great. It was amazing to see that city and during those times.
Yeah. I got married in 1984, and we went to New Orleans for our honeymoon, and so that's our place. We go really often, every year, maybe 2 years, something like that. We're there. So, great place. Just such good food. So, as you said, you're there and you're learning about foods you've never seen before and heard before, and you really picked up on some of the Cajun ideas and.
Yeah, I think just understanding flavor and how to build.
That's what they do there. I think that's the secret of New Orleans, or
really
not the secret, but they build on flavor without using just salt. They have all kinds of flavorings in there.
Yeah, and I tend to correct people when they say, "Oh, New Orleans food is spicy." No, it's not spicy. It's spiced, it's herbed, it's seasoned. It's not spicy. It's no different than how we use seasoning here in San Antonio, right? There's little nuances of chili under something, or a little adobo, or you find it. It's not spicy, right? It's just seasoned. And growing up, I used to, I always say that salt and pepper was something in my household that kind of sat in two shakers on the table, and that's where it was. My parents weren't cooking with it, right? They just and there was probably about 5 or 6 spices in the cabinet. It wasn't this gamut of So you get to New Orleans and you're like celery salt, garlic powder, different types of cayenne, and, all these things, and you're like dried thyme, and and I was like, whoa, and it just really my palate was developed in New Orleans. It
Wow.
really was. It's just I can taste things now. I can find things. I can see what's missing, and constantly telling my cooks, if you're not tasting, you're not cooking, because there's no way to know if that dish you're making, if you don't taste, that a la minute pan sauce, if you're not tasting it every time, you're never going to develop that palate, because the 500th time you taste it, you're going to go, wait, no. Did you put the garlic in?
Yep.
Like you're gonna realize real quickly, and that's how we develop our palates. And
Yes.
New Orleans was that place for me.
Yeah. I wrote down some of the restaurants that you worked at in New Orleans. You were at Dickie Brennan's Steakhouse.
Yeah.
You worked at Metro Bistro,
Yep.
Restaurant Beche, and then you told us you worked at Luke.
Yeah.
And then of course August, which is
Yeah.
also a Beche restaurant, right?
Yeah.
So you really worked a lot with it's John Beche, right? What's his first name?
Yeah, John.
Yeah. You worked a lot with him.
10 years with him. I started, Metro Bistro was a amazing chef I worked for, Chris Brown, who was like, at that time, like an older brother to me. When I moved there, and you can imagine as a 21-year-old, you can get in a lot of trouble in a city like that,
Yeah.
right?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
Chris
Yes.
Chris is and was and always will be that person who is a guiding light for me, who looks out for me. We talk all the time, and I just I'm always appreciative of his friendship and just his kick in the pants that he would give me that I needed, right? And I worked with him for many years. At Dominique's, he was the sous chef. Then he left to go open Metro, and I followed him. I was like, this guy is amazing. I got a job working at Dickie Brennan's. That they were just opening their new steakhouse, and it was very exciting and different and new. And I started out there as a line cook, and within a short time, I ended up in their butcher shop where I was cutting all their steaks.
cool.
Oh, I
And-
bet that was
Yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah.
Have you done that before other than in school?
No,
Yeah.
and it's funny. I tell this story to a lot of my young cooks, but at that time, I got 2 days off a week, and we had a butcher shop where the butcher was in there cutting all the steaks, chops. He had a bandsaw, and I would give up 1 day off a week to just go hang with him. And I remember the first day I walked in there, and he said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I wanted to see if you need any help." He's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You're off today." I said, "I know, but I want to know what you know." And I did that for months.
Wow.
And he would look at it that first day. He looked at it like, sucker, like, what are you doing here? I'm going to put your ass to work.
Yeah.
And he just we just meshed. And so he ended up getting a promotion to another restaurant. And I remember the chef coming to me and said, "Well, you're the only other person here that knows how to do the job." Right.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was about learning and understanding. And so I've always been like that. When I worked at Harris Casino, they had a bake shop. I would go work in the bakery so I could learn the bread and
That's
the
so
pastries,
cool.
and,
Yeah.
and just giving up that 1 day a week, right? And 8 hours just to go and get that knowledge.
Yeah.
And so I loved working. Dickie's was great. And then I got I moved over to Ralph Brennan Restaurant Group, the two cousins, right? And so I got a sous chef job with Ralph, and I loved working in his concepts. And I ended up at his Italian restaurant as chef de cuisine, and there was kind of a aha moment where, not a good aha moment, but one where you're like, wait a minute, I'm 20 at this point. I'm like 24 years old, 25, and I'm running a restaurant. This can't be right. I'm not learning, and now I'm the one teaching, and I'm, it just, for me, it just was, I'd gone too fast. And I've had this conversation with a lot of cooks over the years. It's like, slow down, what's the rush? I understand that restaurant across the street looking for a sous chef, but is that where you want to work? Is that what you want to do, or you just want the title?
Yeah.
And I think that was a moment for me where I was like, what am I doing? And that was kind of how I ended up working with John. He was opening his steakhouse at Harris, and I had actually applied at August as a line cook, because I had eaten, my wife and I, we would do this thing where we would go eat at restaurants for lunch because we couldn't afford dinner. And I remember, and it still stings a little bit, but I remember her saying to me, she goes, I don't know why you don't work here. This is the food you want to do. And I was just like, but I'm a chef at a restaurant, you know?
Yeah.
But I wasn't cooking what I wanted to cook. And she's like, this food is what you look at in your books every single day. Why are you not working here? You know? And I remember it because it was lunch, and I'm thinking to myself, this is some of the best lunch food I've ever had. Like dinner, yeah, I expect to be blown away. But
Right.
lunch, I was like, God, this salad's amazing. This pasta, handmade tortellinis, and you know, just like, what is going on here? So I applied, and I remember getting a call from him, and you know, he said, you know, why are you applying here? I said, I want to learn. You know, this is the food I want to cook. And he goes, we're opening a steakhouse, and I need a chef, and you have experience. And I just remember telling him that, like, I want to learn. He's like, you're going to learn. And I was like, no, I want to learn. And he's like, you're going to learn. And boy, was he right. I mean, he pushed me to the limits.
Wow,
He
that's so
pushed
cool.
me farther than anyone's ever pushed me. And, you know, it was a really great experience. And I'm working for one of the largest, casino companies in the world. I was learning so much about business, and, you know, email was super new, and, you know, and just all of these things. And it was just really, really cool.
Wow. I mean, just hearing all of this and your passion for learning and all of that kind of thing, it totally it is understandable as to why you are 6 times James Beard nominated chef. No, seriously, because you have this passion to want to learn.
Yeah.
And it never stops. And that is how you become great.
Yeah, no, I'm still like, you know, moving to San Antonio was just all new ingredients and new techniques and new flavors and new customers and you know, what does the customer want, and listening to those things, and you know, cooking a cactus paddle or a prickly pear or using hibiscus and mesquite beans and all these things that you're just like, this is all new and exciting, and I'm in a new place. You know, I mean, I love it. I love cooking from where I'm at. I think
Yeah, and I think that that's something that your restaurants and you know, the concept of your restaurants, I mean, you really get into the actual what's being grown here.
Yeah,
you know what?
You're very much local. You source locally as much as you can. I think
that was the biggest lesson that, as a chef, that Katrina taught me was that when, you know, because prior to that fateful day, I was the chef of August, or I'm sorry, I was sous chef at August at this point. And, we were dependent on the most far-flung ingredients. You know, we were that restaurant, right? We were shipping in abalones and truffles from here, and, you know, peppers from here, and, you know, peppercorns from here, and just, you know, we were so ingredient driven in that regard. And when you have a city on its knees, and you at the same time have the big box trucks no longer showing up, and you no longer have the FedEx truck coming in with your abalone, and you no longer have you know, you have people saying that city's never coming back, and you have people saying, you know, oh no, we're not coming in there anymore. You know, the streets are a mess, and, you know, how do you run a restaurant?
Yeah.
And I remember that aha moment where John and we were sitting there, and it was just, well, a farmer called me. He's got some chickens, you know, and we got our hands on some catfish. You know, catfish at Restaurant August, you know, like that's unheard of.
Yeah.
And bread pudding, you know, and all of a sudden you're going through your pantry and you're trying to figure out, you know, so we would make a menu, and it was like 3 items long, and it was like smoked chicken, bread pudding, and maybe like a tomato salad, because we had
the
a
best
farmer
smoked chicken that you'd ever.
you know, and you know, and that was it. And you would just build on that, and so we really learned that lesson.
It's really cool.
That if you were going to be a part of the city and you were going to come back, you weren't doing it on your own.
Yeah.
You were going to have to rely on what you had, what you can get your hands on, and what was available to you. And so that is probably that lesson that was seared into my soul as a chef to this day, that I cook with what I have, not can I get my hands on some Rouge Barbet from the Mediterranean, because I don't want to have snapper from the Gulf like everybody else.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I think I think that it makes you, for the people who live in that city, it creates this connection, and I think it's brilliant.
Well, we always talk about that's the difference between a local restaurant and some big chain.
Yeah.
The farmer who grew those vegetables and who raised that cow. Yeah. In fact, I kind of learned that lesson from you, and I don't know if you'll remember this. When you had Landrace, you have that with the K bar. Is that the
chef's counter? Yeah, I remember when y'all sat there.
Where you sit there, and for dessert, I don't remember what the dessert was, except for it also had ice cream made from a local water buffalo. And I found out, I know all about the water buffalo now. They're raised in the South San Antonio, and they sell them in Blanco.
Yeah.
And I remember asking Jeffrey Spahn, where did this come from? How did he find this? He says he always looks around the neighborhood, the area, and buys from people that have food around here.
Yeah.
And there's somebody that has a herd of water buffalo, and you found it.
Yeah.
And so I didn't look for that kind of stuff until I saw that.
Yeah. And so
it
for
always stayed
me,
with me.
so the my first experience was, and I was just blown away because it was so interesting and different. But it was it was actually at Landrace, and it was your tartare with the quail egg and the caviar.
Yeah.
Anyway, it just blew me away because it was presented in such a unique way that I had not experienced before, and I was just like, oh my gosh. Anyway, I just thought that was really interesting.
No, I think what's great now is having that reputation. There's people seek me out now, which is fun, So you'll get somebody, a farmer or a producer, or I don't know if you know JD. Well, JD's Chili Parlor. Right. They make. They make chili sauces for HEB.
Kimberly's friend,
yeah,
isn't
exactly.
it? Yes.
Yep.
And one day they came to me and they said, "Hey, I don't know if you know this, but we also we jar prickly pear juice." I'm like,
interesting.
Okay, cool. And it's expensive. I was like, we'll figure it out.
For cocktails?
So, we use it in cocktails, desserts,
I love it.
sauces.
How cool.
You make ceviches. We use it in all kinds of stuff, right? And so it's like I love when like all of a sudden those things just like land in my lap. And he produces, Mitch Hagney. He produces in Mitch's Food Hub. And so I love those connections where people will bring me stuff now, and I'm just like, yep. What do you mean? Yeah, I'm like, yeah, I'll take it. Can I get like 6 cases? Or,
right.
Sure.
Right.
and Sylvia, my wife, who does our bar program,
yes.
She looks at like what we're doing in the kitchen, and she's like, oh, what is that? That's prickly pear. I may have some, and we're constantly, like she has like a really cool bee pollen cocktail on the menu right now that she's using
good.
local, bee pollen from Holdman honey, so like having those little things that people know that like they can just bring it. We're like, yep. It's funny. I have a farmer, John Peterson, who shows up every Thursday, and he sends me a text like Wednesday night. Here's what I'm bringing tomorrow. He doesn't even ask anymore, and I love that because he knows not to ask.
Yeah.
Right. Here's what I'm bringing tomorrow,
and you'll figure out what to do.
Oh, duck eggs. Oh, look at this. Oh, we've got. Oh, look, Brussels sprouts are in. Cool. And like we get, and the chefs and I in the kitchen, we just get super excited because it's something new and fun and different, right? So
I just want to spend a day in your kitchen. I'm serious.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
That is
So
cool.
So Luke is what brought you to San Antonio initially, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you've just kind of from there.
Yeah, I was with John and Johnny Hernandez. I blame him for everything, and I blame he's the worst person. No, I'm just kidding. We became very fast friends in San Antonio, and that's one thing I've always cherished about this city is that when I moved here, there was so many people that reached out, and it's not the chefs in this city work together. They're not competitive. Johnny, Jason, Bruce, Andrew, Deanna, Blanca, so many folks reached out and like, welcome to the city. Rosemary, who we became very good friends, would come by Luke and frequent and say, sit down, I want to talk to you, and I just, there's such a great community of chefs. And Johnny was one of those people early on. He just said, hey, I just opened this new spot at Pearl, and I was having conversation with their CEO, and they're looking for more folks. And he was like, I don't know if you're interested. I said, oh boy, I said, I can take a meeting, and
Did you have any idea what Pearl was going to be?
No. I remember the first time driving through, and it was like a couple of Andrew restaurants, some old buildings, and then like a big green space, like a huge, like, we did paella on like a green space one year, and I was like, and the building that Kieran in was like behind a construction fence. I mean, it was just like rubble, and you're just like, I don't know what all that is. And I remember my wife saying that would make a great build. That would make a beautiful great restaurant one day.
Yeah.
So Johnny, and I met at the time Ken Halliday, who was CEO, and he had just finished with his own battle with blood cancer, and I had just finished my own, and so we just really hit it off. And he to this day has become a bit of a mentor to me. He's retired and living a great life, but I still reach out to him time to time on hey, I had a question about something, and it seemed serendipitous, right? And it seemed like a good fit. And I never, at that point, didn't ever, I could have worked with John the rest of my life. I enjoyed working with him, but here was this really cool opportunity to kind of do something.
And,
So I jumped on it. I almost lost my life a year prior, so I figured
you may as well
might as
well,
go.
So
that's it. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to stop, but let's stop here and take a break, and we'll come right back and learn more.
And we'll jump into cured.
Yes, with Chef Stephen McHugh, and we'll be right back. Susie, one of our biggest audience members is restaurant owners or people that are thinking about getting into restaurants.
Yes.
And from talking to them, the biggest issue they have in running a restaurant is their POS system.
Absolutely. It's such an important, of course, part of being a restaurant owner.
Yeah. And some of them they're just these big behemoth software companies that do so much, it just gets... San Antonio POS is who we recommend because San Antonio POS is locally owned, locally managed, and you get local service.
Absolutely. I mean, we've heard some restaurant owners who have been in such a pickle. They've needed to get a representative out there to fix something on their POS system because it is so important, and they haven't been able to get a hold of somebody or get somebody out there. They'll tell them it's 3 days before we can get somebody out there, and that is not workable. Where with San Antonio POS, because they are local, they're there and ready to help.
They're right away. San Antonio POS uses SkyTab, which is a software that was made for the hospitality industry, and it has everything you already want. But the first thing that our friend David Dyken that owns San Antonio POS, he'll come out and he'll sit with you and find out exactly what your processes are and design it for your restaurant.
Yeah, and one of the reasons, because we are really picky about who we work with, even sponsors. We want to make sure that they are.
You're not picky. You work with me.
Yeah. I'm very picky.
All right.
But David is amazing. He has a heart like we do, as far as the restaurant owners go, where he really cares and he goes in there. He wants the restaurant to succeed.
And he's been doing this more than 30 years, so he knows
what he's doing. Exactly.
Yeah.
The other cool thing about San Antonio POS is that system is there's no hidden costs.
That's right.
So a lot of different systems, they charge for their gift cards, they charge for loyalty programs, they charge for all of those different types of things where it's all included.
Yeah. And not only that, right now they have a special. If you have a San Antonio POS put into your system, afterwards, you'll get $5,000 back. That helps to cover the costs for your training, helps to cover the costs of any downtime that you had while switching. It really is a great opportunity.
It is a great program. Exactly, yeah. So David Dyken is the individual that you want to get a hold of. He owns San Antonio POS, and as we said, amazing fella. And you can go to his website. Alan, his phone number is 210-723-6075. Make sure you say that San Antonio Restaurants or the Flavors of Texas sent you.
That's right. And you can also go to our website, which is theflavorsoftexas.com. Scroll down to the bottom, and you'll see a banner that says San Antonio POS. Click on that, and it takes you right there.
Absolutely.
All right. And we are back. And
Yes,
today
we
on
are.
The More You Know, The Better It Tastes,
Yep.
we have Chef Stephen McHugh. He is the owner of Cured, which of course is at Pearl at 306 Pearl Parkway, and also the private club, the Spurs Club.
Yep.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you first of all about Cured. How did you decide on the menu at Cured? Because it's mostly it's cured things, cured meats, cured you know, vegetables and everything.
I luckily, I was told the restaurant would take about 6 months to build, and it took 14. So luckily, I had a lot of time to think and study and put a fine, pen to what I was doing. And I was listening to the people I wanted to work with, the farmers, the ranchers, the people I still work with. And we started a lot of conversations about what I kept hearing was that I'm a pig farmer.
Okay.
I raise cattle. I don't raise pork chops. I don't raise, pork bellies, which is what everybody wants, right? And I started really thinking about these issues and these problems that they were having. So we started saying, well, in my brain, I was like, well, what if we're just a whole animal butchery restaurant? I know how to do all that. I've learned all that. I've done it for years on small scale. But, what if we're bringing in whole rounds of beef and breaking it down and bringing in, the middles and bringing in whole pigs, goats, lamb, ducks, whatever it is, and listening to these issues. And so it really stemmed from there. Okay, you're going to bring in a whole pig. Well, what are you going to do with it? And so I had opened a restaurant with John in New Orleans called Dominica. And I really dove headfirst into the charcuterie aspect of that restaurant. And we had a custom built curing cabinet built for that restaurant. And so not stealing ideas, but thinking, how do I take that? It's not Cured's not an Italian restaurant, but how do I take that idea of doing it ourselves? And so I said, well, we can make our own hams. I know how to do that. I can cure a copa, and I can make salamis and sausages and pâtés, and we can take the kidneys and do this, and the heads and the ears and the thing, and all of a sudden a menu was created.
Wow.
We started just growing, but it had to be a menu that was fluid. It had to be a menu that, so I was very adamant about the fact I have to be able to print every day. And we still do to this day. We go through a lot of paper.
Really? New menu every day?
I was going to say,
We
so is it a
print
new menu every day?
Every day. We print every single day. And that's just not based on animal parts, but it's, produce.
Seasonal produce. And
I ran out of kale last night on the lamb that we're doing. So we're going to do, I got to think what I have in there. We have some Brussels. We have some Napa that Mitch gave me.
that is
I've
the
got some
coolest.
stuff. So
I love that so much. That is so cool. I mean, you cannot find that anywhere where, you every single day it's a fresh menu.
yeah, it does make it, create some
yeah, I'm
challenges
sure.
for my chefs and myself because we're
sure.
constantly going,
That is
what
that
are we
is
doing?
so exciting.
But so we have this ability to listen. One of my producers right now, he came to me and said, "Hey, look," he's like, we literally had this conversation last night. I have a chef in Austin that's buying up all my wild boar shoulders and legs for trim because he's making sausage and pâté with it. But I've got all these racks, and I'll give them to you at a really good price. But I've got 80 pounds of boar racks in my freezer. Okay, let's do it. And literally right now I have wild boar on the menu.
Wow.
That's selling really well. And listening to how can I help you as opposed to being like, I don't want that.
Yeah.
No, my customers aren't going to eat that. It's
I mean, there's
we'll figure it out.
so many cool things about that. One is it continues your learning process. You're getting new things every single day. So you're going to have to think about, okay, what can we do with this? How can we, just so it keeps that going. So I'm sure that keeps it fresh and exciting for you. But your chefs, this has to be the most exciting thing ever to work in a kitchen that.
Yeah, they walk in, they're like, oh, what is that? that doesn't look like the normal pig we get. No, that's borax. What? But boar, tell me more. Explain it to me, but at the same time, I'm talking to my producer and I'm like, well, what's the chef in Austin doing? He's making what? He's making a salad,
Yeah,
And I know that, and it's Chef Jesse Griffiths at Daidui, one of the best restaurants in the state. And I'm always like, what's Jesse up to?
Yeah.
What's he doing? Oh, boar pate. That sounds fun.
Yeah.
And so like the wheels are turning, right? So it's and he'll do the same thing. You're like, what are you up to these days, chef? So it's really cool having these relationships with folks and just listening to like, here's what I'm thinking, and you've got this. All right, I can figure that out. I can do that.
So there's more to the name of Cured that went into when you were naming this restaurant. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, I did not come up with the name, which is the crazy part. We for months could not figure out what we were going to call this place. Right? It was the old admin building, so we're thinking that maybe it's the admin, I was very fortunate that my architect was really good friends with, he went to college with Jet Butler, and my architect's Jonathan Card, but he went to college with a gentleman by the name of Jet Butler who had a branding company in Austin called Foodie. And very early on, Jonathan said, listen, a lot of times, a restaurant gets built, a chef creates something, and then they hire a branding company and they come in and they do the rest. And he said, I really think that we should bring Jet on now and have him help us drive this. And it was one of the smartest things anyone's ever said to me, because the brander looked at what the architect was doing, looked at what I wanted to do, and and was very much involved in not just logos and those type of things, but like, I think this should look like this. And I think the color palette on this wall should be this. And I think, if you're going to do brass here, then I think, and let me see your menu. You're going to do a lot of charcuterie. Your charcuterie case is not big enough. Not big enough that you're not going to be able to sustain it, but big enough that you're not going to be able to tell the story. Because we had a smaller one in mind. Right. And, so Jet, Jonathan, Sylvia, myself, we had this kind of fluid.
That's cool.
Where we were working off of everybody else's, and it wasn't, nobody's idea was better than the other, right? So I would say, well, here's my menu. And he'd say, okay. Well, we need to format it like this because this is not a traditional menu. And we're going to create kind of a separate charcuterie menu over here. Oh, I didn't think about that. I was thinking like the chicken liver is its own dish and the rillettes its own dish. And he came up with this idea of like, no, let's create a separate menu where people can build their own platters. Like, oh, wow. So it was very smart. And then we got to know Jet. We got to know his team. And he came to me one day and he said, we got it figured out. Okay, what's that? He's like, we're going to call it Cured. Really? It's like, yeah, it's because it's based on your story, your fight with blood cancer and what you've done as a chef and who you are. And it was just like, like light bulb. You're just like, wow. And that's why I always tell people,
what
like,
a happy coincidence that it has both aspects of
I
it.
tell people all the time, it's sometimes, understand that, it's okay to know what you don't know. And I don't know branding. And I don't know that world. Yeah. And Jet looks at like, what's your email address going to look like? What's your website going to look like? All those things. It's like, I'm not that smart.
No,
it's not what I do, right?
It's not that you're not that smart. It's just that's not your thing.
Yeah.
Like, you're very smart in your thing.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it was just like this aha moment where we're like, duh.
Yeah.
And so.
So this cookbook that I have to show, you guys can see. How did this come about? I mean, it's amazing. I just looked at it just a few minutes ago, but it is so cool. I mean, really is. I mean, you have the 8 different ways to preserve. Yeah. Kind of laid out, and then recipes behind each one. It's really cool.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, it was like trying to open another restaurant. It is a lot of work.
And it's available on Amazon, or you can get it at any of the local bookstores. The Twig right there at Pearl
Twig
has it.
And at Cured. If you want to come by and get
There
it
you
signed,
go.
yeah.
I'm going to come get mine.
Yeah.
Well, because I'm assuming you're going to take this one.
We'll arm wrestle.
We're going to arm wrestle later. That's right.
You know, I never, you know, I worked on several books with John, and it was a lot of work, and I knew it was going to be a lot of work, and I always said, I'm never going to write a book. That's just I barely graduated high school. What do you mean write a book, right? You know, and I was at a symposium in Oxford. I think it was Oxford, Mississippi, the better Oxford. And I was there with the Southern Foodway Alliance that I, been a member of for 20 something years. I absolutely love what they do. And John T. Edge at the time, who was the who was the founder and the director, he said, I want you to meet somebody. I said, okay. He goes, this is the guy. This is my agent. He does all my books. I said, oh yeah, I met this man, this New Yorker, and David Black, and he looks at me and he says, you're going to write a book. And I said, okay. He goes, no, I know who you are. I know your story. I love what you're doing. I think you're doing amazing things, and you're writing a book. And he met my PR folks were there, and he's, get this guy signed up. Let's go. And I was just like, okay,
Wow.
And he hounded me.
Yeah.
And I just said, listen, I don't mind doing this. And I've got the support of my family and my, the people I work with, but I need to find a co-author that I don't want to, I just said, I don't want to work with somebody who's going to make me feel stupid, because this is not what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell stories, I can write recipes, I can do all that, but I can't write, and he said, don't worry, we'll find that person. And we interviewed a few folks, and then I met Paula Forbes, who I just was like so at ease. I am still at ease when I'm around her. And I think she's, if you know anything about her, she's a powerhouse. She just literally became the new food editor for Texas Monthly.
Wow.
Oh,
She's
I didn't know that.
She's taking Pat's job, who, Pat, big shoes to fill, right? Pat had that position for 50 years. But Paula, born and raised in Wisconsin,
Oh, there you go.
lived in New York, now lives in Texas, right? So we had
yeah.
so much
She just missed
Right.
Louisiana.
Yeah,
Georgia.
exactly.
we had so much in common, and we just would laugh, and we would tell stories about like my mom's casserole or and she just had all these same experiences. And so she just made me feel comfortable in my own self, and gave me confidence that this was going to be something worth doing,
Yeah.
and not just like, I see it sometimes where like chef, open a restaurant, open another restaurant, write a book,
Yeah.
and I didn't want it to be like this, like, okay, now I have to write my
Next
book
step.
because
Right.
this is what I do next.
Yeah.
And I see those books, and I have some of those books, and I go, this book is awful. And I didn't want that. And I really wanted it to have meaning. And the book, from the very beginning, David said to me, do not write a chef book, do not write a restaurant book, because they don't sell.
Yeah.
You need to write a book for people who actually buy books, which are not line cooks and other chefs like you think.
Well,
It's
that
home
was.
cooks.
I think that's why I got so excited about this when I started looking through it. Is because I love the learning aspect of it. It's not just a recipe book. I love that there are those 8 different elements where I'm going to learn something. I'm going to learn. Oh wow! So I can actually use fat to preserve, or I can, and how to do that. And now there's recipes. That's what got me excited about it. So yeah, I think that.
Yeah. It definitely is the way we cook at Cured. We cook with what we have, and the book gives you that ability. It takes a lot of times you read a recipe in a book and you go, I'm not going to go out and buy cardamom. I just can't do that, right? What am I going to do with the rest of the $12 jar that sits in the cabinet, right? Yeah. So this book gives you the ability to adjust and move by what you have or what you want.
Cool.
So
That's good.
if you take the dehydrated tomato recipe and say, well, I don't have tomatoes, but I do have some mushrooms that are starting to look a little sorry in the refrigerator. Fine, dehydrate some mushrooms, and now you've got mushrooms for that next risotto or a soup or whatever it is you're doing. And so it gives you the ability to kind of use what you have, utilize what you have, use your pantry, your freezer in ways that you probably haven't thought about, and taking that haul from the farmer's market or that glut of zucchini from the garden and doing something with them.
So cool.
Yeah. Susie, we're running out of time.
We are.
I
So
have so much we want to talk about still.
Just as quickly as we can, tell us a little bit about the Spurs Club and how you got involved with that, because it's pretty cool. That's exciting.
Well, I'm a huge Spurs fan, and I love it. And when I was approached, I'm working with a group called Legends, and they're the operators. I'm the consultant for them. I write recipes, I write menus. I love to go out there and just work with the team. It's a private membership club attached to the practice facility, and what's really cool about that is there's these huge glass windows where you can look down on practice and watch.
Cool.
So it's fun just grabbing a cold beer and watching Chris Paul and Wemby and the guy the gang out there. Just it's really cool. But it's 6 days a week. We're closed on Sundays, but we have lunch and dinner, and it's a really fun project to be involved with, and they really keep quality at the front of what they're doing. We're doing some things out there that you can't find at Cured or any other restaurant.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to ask. So is it the same concept though of seasonal and We've been open a year. We've changed our menu 3 times already. Wow.
And we just finished a menu change going into spring, and it's cool. They listen, which is great. I appreciate that, and but I like listening to them and listening to what the diner is saying. It's a different customer from Cured. Obviously, we're on the north side. We have some of the same crossover, but it's a lot of fun. I'm learning a lot about that type of environment, that club environment, and it's a really cool project.
Another learning.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I had
That's
no
so
idea
cool.
what clubs. I was not a club person. I didn't grow up in country clubs, so to understand that client is very cool.
Oh, that's very cool.
And we're doing some really fun things. A lot of dry aging, a lot of fun seafood, which I play with a little bit of seafood at Cured, but we're doing some fun curing techniques and things like that.
Awesome.
Wow, very cool. Well, before we end,
Yes.
our mutual friend Nick Zimmerly, who's one of the chefs at Fish City Grill,
Love Nick.
he loves to make cheeses. He loves to make sausage. So he gave me a couple of questions. I just got to throw them at you real quick.
Oh, boy.
What temperature do you keep your curing cases?
I love you, Nick. You're the best. So that's a great question. I know we're running out of time, but if you can imagine, during pandemic, we were running a 4,000 square foot food truck. That was that's what I called Cured at the time, because we were just putting food out the side window.
Right.
Our curing case got empty really quickly because I wasn't putting stuff in it, but I was selling stuff out of it. And so when we were allowed to reopen as a restaurant, Sylvia, my partner and my wife, she said, we need to fill this thing. We got to fill it quick. And as you know, it takes a long time to cure things. So she said, why don't you just start dry aging? So we started dry aging. And so for my temperature, when I'm curing, I keep it at 60 degrees, but I cannot dry age at 60 degrees. So I had to turn it down. We're down at around 42 right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So all of our charcuterie, which we still have our beneficial molds, we still have our noble molds, we have all the good things going on. They just take twice as long.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was actually just going to ask that question. Is dry aging the same as curing? But you just answered it. So
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you ever make cheese?
Just nothing on the level of what Nick's doing. I follow what he's doing in his cave. He's doing some really cool stuff.
Really cool stuff,
Just real quick farmer cheeses. With I'll buy a culture and inoculate it myself. So farm cheeses and yogurts. But nothing, not yet, Nick.
Not as
I'm
yet.
working on it.
Yeah, I make yogurt, so I'm on.
Yeah.
I have one little step there. and finally, how did you first get into curing, aging, fermenting, and all that? Why was that interesting to you?
It just was these old world techniques that I felt that we weren't doing. We were losing. Now it's, here we are 11 years later. It's kind of commonplace to see a charcuterie board on Instagram or, 11 years ago, people couldn't even say charcuterie, and now it's like, a buzzword, which is great. I'm happy for that. I just, like I said, I just wanted to figure out ways to use the pieces and parts, and I started studying and learning and just really tweaking. And sometimes the experiments go wrong, and that's okay. You figure it out. And
yeah, but I think it's a whole different scene when you can build charcuterie boards with meats that are cured in-house.
Yeah.
That's a whole different scene than going out
pickles, preserves, marmalades, mustards, all that.
Yeah.
Crazy.
All right. Well, there you go, Nick. We got your questions in for you. Chef, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. We need to have you back because I have 50 questions that I didn't answer, that I didn't ask.
I have a lot. So we would love to have you back.
Y'all.
Hope you would do that. And, man, everyone needs to go out to Cured.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you need to go out to the Spurs practice and just look at the building and say, man, one day I want to go in there.
Yeah. And again, and for you guys listening, I know Cured is a popular restaurant, but for those who haven't been there or heard, I hope that this kind of opened your eyes to what's happening out there, because it really is
cool place. Yeah, go online, look at the menu, and then you're going to want to go.
Yep.
Thank y'all so much. I appreciate all the
you.
hard work you guys do as well. It's really fun following your journey.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks. We have a lot of fun. All right. Well, folks, we will be back again next week with another great interview. Don't know who it'll be, but it'll be great.
It'll be a great one.
All right. So until then, please share this with your friends. Let everyone know about the more you know, the better it tastes.
Yes, and get out there and try something new and different and fun.
There you go. That's it. All right. Stephen McHugh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Bye, guys.